This month on 219 West, a new weapon in the war on AIDS.
I think it's a total game changer.
It's called PrEP, a daily pill to prevent HIV infections, but not everyone knows about it. Charter versus public school choice. It's a debate that has divided New York City.
My oldest is in high school. I'm good with where she's at education-wise, and with the twins, I'm more than the charter school has more than reached my expectations.
Hello and welcome to 219 West. I'm Bianca Flowers.
And I'm Pearl Masek. We will have those stories plus a look at a campaign to change how the United Nations chooses its leader. But first, there's a new medication in the fight to prevent the spread of HIV. It's called PrEP. Brian Absidis has the story.
Every day, Mateo Rodriguez takes 3 pills. One is for the Queen's resident's diabetes. Another is for his high blood pressure. The third, he started in May. But the point of it isn't to treat a condition he has, like the other ones.
I kind of felt like I wanted to take a pill that was my choice, and I wanted to take a pill that was doing something to protect me from something.
The pill that the 25-year-old journalist takes is called Truvada. It's a combination of 2 drugs that have long been used to treat HIV infection. But Rodriguez isn't HIV positive. Instead, he takes the pill to stop himself from ever contracting the virus which causes AIDS. He's using Truvada for pre-exposure prophylaxis, protecting himself before exposure. The FDA only approved Truvada as a pre-exposure prophylaxis, or PrEP, in 2012, after several studies showed its effectiveness. But the pill is already changing the fight against HIV and AIDS, even as it upends some old ideas.
I think it's a total game changer. I would indicate PrEP for anybody that I felt was at ongoing risk for HIV. So that could be a gay man, that could be a heterosexual woman, that could be someone that's injecting drugs. So really it's across the spectrum.
Urbina says that not nearly enough people know about PrEP. That despite PrEP being central to Governor Cuomo's recently announced plan to end HIV infections in New York by 2020, studies from Truvada's manufacturer show that just under 2,000 prescriptions for the drug were filled for the purpose of preventing HIV in its first 2 years of availability. In the meantime, HIV infection rates have continued to rise. Among gay and bisexual men, they jumped 22% between 2008 and 2010. About 1/3 of those new infections occurred among black men.
When young gay men, in particular Hispanic and black men, we see that those rates continue to go up. So again, we point out that, essentially we failed in terms of our actual prevention strategies and really reducing the number of new HIV infections. So let's start there.
Doctors don't say that everyone in those categories needs to take PrEP, just those with a certain risk profile. Among them, those that may have a partner who is HIV positive, or those who do not use condoms consistently. For some, the drugs carry side effects, including nausea, heart palpitations, and kidney problems. But people have also worried that Truvada might cause people to take bigger risks, like having sex without a condom.
And now that we have PrEP, maybe people will engage in more sexual activity because they feel they have a backup. The first message is that PrEP protects you against HIV infection, but has no protection against any of the other sexually transmitted diseases, such as syphilis, chlamydia, gonorrhea, human papillomavirus, herpes. You are not protecting any of the other diseases.
But some have expressed doubt about PrEP's efficacy as a national prevention strategy. One group recently even placed ads in newspapers in several states. The ads expressed concern that people will abandon condoms and fail to take the pill daily, worsening the HIV problem. Mainstream scientists have echoed concerns about adherence, but reject the group's claims about the drug's effectiveness and current condom usage. There are also concerns about Truvada's costs. It's about $1,400 per month if you're uninsured. That price may put it out of reach of lots of people who would benefit from it.
We don't want that to be the case where PrEP is only available to those who are affluent, those who are white, those who are this, those who are that. We want to make PrEP available and accessible to all who need it.
There is little data on who has been prescribed PrEP, and Gilead, the drug's manufacturer, didn't speak to us for this story. Activists, though, have been pushing to expand access for blacks, Latinos, the uninsured, women, and those whose doctors might resist the drug on principle. Events like the PrEP rallies put on by St. Luke's Roosevelt Hospital, as well as the World AIDS Day rally at the Apollo Theater, have aimed to educate people about their options. For Rodriguez and many like him, these are valid concerns. But they say that one of the advantages of Truvada is that it allows us to be just a little bit less anxious about the consequences of sex. Decades after the start of the AIDS crisis, it may help those who are at high risk of HIV infection to regain intimacy and pleasure.
Sex is supposed to be something that feels good and that connects us, and you release oxytocin afterwards and you get that bond with someone and stuff like that. Sex is supposed to feel really good, and there's nothing wrong with feeling pleasure and naming that you're someone who likes to feel pleasure. I really don't see a problem with that.
For 219 West, this is Brian Herbsidis reporting.
Last month, we told you about a group of workers, day laborers, mostly undocumented and unprotected, who are fighting wage theft. Sometimes they aren't paid what they're promised. Sometimes they aren't paid at all. At New York's 3 major airports, thousands of service workers are facing other forms of wage theft, and they're fighting back. Ching Ching Chen has the story.
They are the people who check your tickets, help with your luggage, or bring a wheelchair. They are security agents, baggage handlers, and cabin cleaners, the people who come aboard after passengers leave the plane and clean up the mess left behind. Some work directly for the Port Authority of New York and New Jersey, the airport operator. Others work for companies contracted by the airlines. David Harrison has been working as a skycap at the JFK airport since 2010. His employer, Allstate Maintenance, a subcontractor at the airport. For years, the company paid him far below the minimum wage, around $4 an hour.
When I first started as a skycap, I was making $3.90 an hour. And after about a year later, we were bumped up to about $4.15, from $4.15 to $4.40.
Even though he got a raise, David was still underpaid. His employer said it had a good excuse to pay him less.
We had tip workers, and they tried to make it seem as if we make enough money in tips so that it's okay for them to underpay us.
But for David and many workers like him, tips don't provide a steady, dependable income. He was earning below the minimum wage. In New York State, workers like David are supposed to make at least $6 an hour. The Port Authority took notice of this violation of the minimum wage laws and last July issued new guidelines. They required all employers, including subcontractors, to raise airport worker wages. 2 months later, New York's Attorney General Eric Schneiderman stepped in.
We are recovering $925,000 from Allstate, and the employees who are shortchanged will be receiving an average of $20,000 apiece in back pay and damages. Because airline passengers sometimes tip skycaps, the company decided it could get away with paying the skycap tipped wage, which is lower than the regular minimum wage. But even if Allstate had fulfilled the legal requirements for taking the tip credit, which the company did not do, it would still have to pay these workers at least $5.40 an hour.
Paying less than required minimum wage is just one form of the wage theft affecting airport workers.
We also see workers not receiving the allowance for laundering their uniforms that the law requires, not receiving proper overtime pay. In New York State, when workers work more than 10 hours a day or work a split shift where their shift that day is cut into 2 parts, There's extra payment that's required. These are just some of the examples of wage theft that workers face.
Brent Guerin is a lawyer for 32BJ SEIU, the union representing building service workers in New York. 80-year-old labor group is now working closely with airport workers. The union supported a series of strikes at JFK and LaGuardia and started a hotline to record and report wage theft issues at the airports. Guerin said they pay special attention to low-paid workers at airports, especially because subcontracting companies don't always follow the rules.
Many new wage regulations, when they come into effect, employers fight them. I think that the employers are, deciding whether to challenge this, challenge the Port Authority, or whether to accept it. I think there is a process in which the contractors who actually employ these workers are in discussions with the airlines who pay the contractors, where they're trying to figure out, I'm hoping, trying to figure out how they will comply. But it's possible that their discussions are about whether they should comply.
A report from NYU's Robert F. Wagner Graduate School of Public Service says that the low-bid contracting system used by the airlines places premium on the bottom line cost of the contract at the expense of the employees. Another research firm, Angela List Grove Research, recently conducted 500 interviews with passenger service workers at the 3 major New York airports. 40% of those surveyed claim to have experienced one form of wage theft. And it's not just underpayment. Papali Dahaj is a cabin cleaner who works for the company Airway. She remembers being forced to work overtime or working through scheduled meal breaks because of delayed flights.
Sometimes we do not get the full 30 minutes lunch because there's a flight at the gate, so they're rushing us to hurry up with our lunch, time to go to that aircraft, so we don't get that full 30 minutes majority of the time.
As part of its recent settlement with Allstate Maintenance, the company that employs SkyCap David Harrison, New York's Attorney General said his office is continuing to fight wage theft at the airports. And the guidelines recently issued by the Port Authority require subcontracting companies to increase the minimum hourly wage to $10.10 and to offer health care benefits next year. But there is no uniform standard for contracts, and not all companies follow the rules. The union's Brent Guerin says 32BJ is preparing to play a bigger role in the battle.
There's a combination of two things that will get companies to adhere to their legal requirements. One is legal enforcement actions, and the second is the actions of the workers.
For SkyCap David Harrison, he's doing better financially. He now earns $9 an hour and enjoys better working conditions, and he remains hopeful and cautious.
But we've gotten uniforms now, which we didn't have before. We had to get our own uniforms before. They've been talking about fixing our carts, the equipment that we use at work. So hopefully the company will start doing what's right and even probably paying us better.
I'm Qingqing Chen for 219 West.
The next Secretary General at the United Nations won't be chosen for almost 2 years, but a campaign is already underway to change how that selection is made. South Korea's Ban Ki-moon has been Secretary General since 2007. He will most likely relinquish his post at the end of 2016. The UN Charter says that the General Assembly appoints the Secretary General according to the Security Council's recommendation. There are 5 permanent members on the Security Council: France, the United States, Russia, the United Kingdom, and China. The new Secretary General has to receive 9 votes in the Security Council and no veto from any of the 5 permanent members. Previous UN leaders have come from every region except Eastern Europe, but the ongoing crisis in Ukraine could stand in the way of any candidate from this area. the beginning of the United Nations, no woman has held this position. However, several are rumored to be candidates in the upcoming election. This secretive process of electing someone to the UN's highest position is the target of a campaign by a group called 1 for 7 billion. Made up of NGOs and former diplomats, the goal is to make the election process more transparent and democratic. Joining us now is Bill Pace, the Executive Director of the Institute for Global Policy. Thanks for coming in today.
Good to be here.
So, the UN Charter was established in 1945, and it says that the Secretary General is chosen upon the recommendation of the Security Council by the General Assembly. Now, is that really the case?
That is the case. The General Assembly, by a vote, appoints the Secretary General. The General Assembly is in charge of the procedures and the term. And in 1945, well, actually in January of 46, the charter was approved in October of 45. In January of 46, they asked the Security Council to look into candidates and to refer one name to them. And that's how it's been done for the last 69 years, is the Security Council forwards a name to the General Assembly, and they take a vote and approve it.
So they only give one name to the General Assembly?
That's what the General Assembly requested 69 years ago, and we're campaigning to get them to change that procedure now.
What sort of changes are you looking for?
Well, it is one of the most challenging, difficult, important jobs in the world, the Secretary General of the United Nations, and it's very important that we move away from the procedures of the letting the Security Council, and in particular the veto members of the Security Council, to very exclusively and in mostly closed negotiations select the Secretary General. And especially with the very bad relationships between the United States, UK, France, Russia, and China, who is the person that those countries are going to agree on to be the Secretary General? We're looking at a process now that will probably lead to who is the least unacceptable person. And what we want is the opposite. We want the most acceptable, the most qualified persons to be put forward for Secretary General, and to have a more transparent, open process of picking the Secretary General.
So why now? Why is the campaign really pushing hard now for these changes?
Well, in fact, we've been working on it, some of us, for 20 years, really. I mean, after the end of the Cold War, at the beginning of the 1990s, the discussion then already was, okay, how do we change a whole range of ways in which the UN's highest officials are appointed and selected, Secretary General being one. We tried in 2006, non-governmental organizations and about 25 countries. We got started way too late. This time the civil society is starting 2 years in advance, and we hope that we can change the process. We've seen in the last several years high officials like of the IMF who had sex scandals associated with them, et cetera. So it's time now that a much greater vetting process. Let's see who the candidates are, what they stand for, what their qualifications are, what their vision is for the United Nations. This individual impacts the lives of 7 billion people literally every day.
And do you have any General Assembly members on board with your campaign?
I think we have probably at least half of the General Assembly that are willing to go along. We've seen statements from the non-aligned movement, which is over 120 countries. We've seen 26 governments who are part of a Swiss coordinated initiative on accountability and transparency of the Security Council. So yes, I think we're going to have a significant support from General Assembly member states.
So the Security Council does rotate candidates from each region, Africa, Latin America, the Caribbean, and they're also pushing for female candidates. Why isn't that enough?
There's never been a woman seriously considered as far as we know, and the Security Council is certainly not pushing. What you will get is the U.S., Russia, and China in a dogfight trying to pick who would they want to be Secretary General, who will give them the least amount of problems, who will they work for, who will deliver to them. That's not a process we want now. Whether that's a woman or a man is not going to be the number one factor to them. But yes, it's time now that the highly qualified women from all of the regions of the world who are available should be nominated and make themselves available and have a process where the General Assembly meets with some of the candidates, has discussions with them, and perhaps even this time, instead of ask the Security Council to send them one name, maybe ask the Council to send them 2 or 3 names to consider. So I think it's the way many international organizations have improved. The World Health Organization, the World Trade Organization, many organizations have now moved to a qualification, merit-based selection process, and that's what we need for the Secretary General.
So what would this more democratic electoral process look like? Would there be more campaigning from the candidates, or how many candidates are you looking for to come forward?
Well, we have at the present, as you indicated, there has been a partial practice of rotating the position around the 5 UN regions, though that really is not a firm practice. Africa just had 3 terms in a row. Now Asia has had 2 terms in a row. East Europe says, oh, now we would like to have a turn, so they want to move to the front of the queue, but the Latin Americans and Caribbean countries are saying, wait, we've been waiting 25 years. Why do you get to come in to the front of the process? So we want to move it away from, let's just pick some very pleasant foreign minister or former head of government or someone from a different region. Let's get the best people in the world nominated, and every region in the world has extremely highly qualified women and men that they could be nominating, and let's let the media, civil society, and of course the member states who will ultimately make the decision seriously engage and take a look at these candidates, get a short list, get the recommendation from the Security Council, and have changed the process.
Now, one argument against this more democratic process is that it would be almost too much democracy. There would be too much choice, that all the General Assembly members would, be able to put forward candidates. What do you say to that?
Well, in the end, it's going to be on the recommendation of the Council, which is 15 members, and whoever is being recommended will have to be acceptable to the 5 members that have veto, the permanent members. So that's certainly not going to be too much democracy in the process. What we have now is 0 democracy in the process, and what we should do is move up so that there is some transparency. But it's not democracy. It's more, let's allow those who would be the most qualified, who actually might be threatening because of their visions of how peacekeeping should be done, how development should be done, how humanitarian assistance should be done. That might be threatening to some of the Security Council members. But so now you get people who are really more weak. I'll do good. Don't worry, I'll appoint the people you want me to appoint to these positions, etc. The process now is not the best process for picking the most qualified individuals.
Bill Pace, thank you so much for coming.
It's good to be with you.
As the debate over traditional public and charter schools intensifies, to people caught in the middle of the controversy, it's not just academic, it's their children's lives. I spent some time with one Brooklyn family living the debate while trying to ensure that their 3 daughters get the best education in a divided system.
Growing up, 308 was a gifted school, a talented and gifted school, and everyone wanted to go there. I recall having a very personal relationship with all of my teachers.
For Danielle Jones, the public school system that she once loved appears much different to her now as a parent.
A lot of the teachers are obviously there for a paycheck.
Like a lot of parents living in some of New York City's most academically challenged school districts, finding a quality education for her children was a top priority.
I was hearing a lot of good things about, the charter schools were more involved with the children. There was less children in the classrooms. There were more teachers in the classrooms. So I just wanted something more personal, for the girls.
Jones' twin daughters, 8-year-olds Kimora and Khalees, were among the first students to enroll when Teaching Firms of America Charter Prep opened for its first day of class 3 years ago in Bed-Stuy, Brooklyn.
Our other option is that wall right there. We can
Rafiq Kalamuddin practiced corporate law for one of the country's top law firms before deciding to switch from the courtroom to the classroom.
Our clients here are Khalees and Kamar, right? Young people in some of our most challenging neighborhoods. But in order to do our job well, it really requires us to have this kind of close relationship. So the thing that's different about TFOA is that this is a teacher-led school through and through. The idea for this school really started out kind of focused on one core issue. How do we dramatically improve the teaching profession? I know if we did that, for the kids who are the most underserved, who are the most needy kids in those particular communities, education would really be transformed for them.
These kids, I've literally known them longer than my 2-year-old daughter. You know, for my 4-year-old, because I've been with them now for 4 years. So it's a different relationship. We look at it like, I think of myself more like a pediatrician than a teacher. You know, you're kind of growing with this, you know, the children, with the family. That's a very different relationship than transactional. You come in from 1 year, and then I have a new set of kids.
Charter school law permits greater autonomy. School can set their own teacher pay scale and have the ability to create its own curriculum. Parents like Kayla Jones, the father of the twins, see other benefits as well.
My biggest thing is the personal aspect of the way the school works as far as dealing with your children. You know, school is hard. Kids are rough, man. Sometimes school becomes a burden, but they don't allow that to happen with them. They're not gonna let somebody get picked on and they don't address it.
Since the first charter school opened its doors in New York in 1999, the movement has been viewed as a threat to traditional public schools. The rapid expansion of charters continues to deepen the divide among cities' education leaders, teachers, and parents. The publicly funded but privately managed schools were initially started to bridge the achievement gap in low-income communities like Central Brooklyn.
I think charter schools in many cities like New York have specifically targeted those areas where there are few good district options. They're an aspect of public education that seems here to stay. And they're an outgrowth of the fact that public education in and of itself over the last several decades has failed too many children.
Give you about 5 to 10 minutes to share around.
As charter school operators like Teaching Firms of America continue to pioneer new strategies for educating struggling students, just a floor below in the same building, a once top-ranked public school has grappled with chronically absent students and lower than state average test scores. Only 21% of PS 308 students met the standards on the English test. Less than 10% met standards in math. Last year at this time, the Jones' 14-year-old daughter, Kayla, walked these same halls as her younger sisters. After making countless calls to teachers to complain about lack of homework, they began to fear that their oldest child was being robbed of her education.
It would be 2 weeks go by, 3 weeks, and there's nothing, no homework. Kamora and Khalees bring home maybe 15 to 20 pages a night of homework. So while it is a little overwhelming, I'm glad that they do get, they do get that much homework, and they're able to do it. They're able to get it done. Whereas Kayla, when Kayla was in the 4th and 5th grade, she may have brought home a sheet of homework, if that. She was always passing, but I wasn't convinced that she was learning anything. It's like she's just getting by.
With KK, she being our first child and the oldest, we were just more concerned about getting her into school, period. Just so happy about we have a daughter, a baby, she's going to school. We didn't really do the due diligence as far as the school was concerned.
But still, for Kayla, public schools has been a successful experience. Now a freshman at Brooklyn High School for Law and Technology, she hopes to someday practice civil rights law.
She's already talking about taking Regents exams, and with the twins, I'm more than, the charter school has more than reached my expectations.
For the Joneses, the battle of charter and public schools has led them to a split decision, one they're happy with. But in the city at large, the fight goes on. For 219 West, I'm Bianca Flowers. Next month, we'll hear some of the voices in the debate over school choice.
That's it for this month's edition of 219 West. I'm Pearl Masick.
And I'm Bianca Flowers. Be sure to tune in next month when we'll have more stories from the 5 boroughs and beyond. From all of us at 219 West, we wish you a happy holiday.